third graders, we're going to continue our Read Aloud, the Tales from the Odyssey. We're on chapter 4, The Feast. Everyone in the great hall stared in shock at Odysseus as he knelt before the queen. Finally, an old man broke the silence. "We must honor our most ancient tradition," he said. "Almighty Zeus tells us never to deny a stranger who asks for our protection. Give this wretched man a chair. Offer him wine and supper." King Aloysius helped Odysseus to a chair. A servant brought a silver basin and washed Odysseus's hands. Others brought him bread and meat and wine. The king and queen and all their guests raised their cups in the air. "To Zeus, protector of worthy strangers," said the king. Then he looked at Odysseus. "Perhaps you are one of the immortals yourself, come down to earth to test our hospitality." Odysseus shook his head. "Pray, sir, do not mistake me for a god. In truth, I am the most wretched of men. If only you knew what misery I have suffered." King Aloysius seemed moved by Odysseus's humble words. He turned to his guests. "Go safely to your homes now. Tomorrow we will honor this traveler with a feast." When the guests had all taken their leave and Odysseus was left alone with the king and queen, the queen spoke gently to him. "I see that you do not wear your own clothes, my friend," she said, "for those are garments that my daughter took to the washing pools this morning. You say that you have come from beyond the sea? In truth, who are you? Where is your home?" Odysseus did not want to reveal his true identity, so he told them only of leaving the island of Calypso and escaping the terrible storm. He told them about their daughter's kindness toward him. Satisfied with his story, the queen ordered by her servants to prepare a room for Odysseus. He was soon led to his bed, where he lay down on soft purple blankets. As soon as the torches were put out, he fell into a deep, restful sleep. The next morning, palace servants set about preparing a great feast. They roasted sheep, boars, and oxen. A messenger was sent to summon the finest singer in the land, a blind minstrel. As King Aloysius' servants made preparations for the feast, Athena walked through the streets of the city. Disguised as the king's herald, she called to every citizen, "Come, lords and princesses. Come, hear the stories of a stranger who has arrived at the palace of the king." A great crowd gathered at the palace for the feast. When King Aloysius brought Odysseus before his people, the crowd gasped. Odysseus could see great wonders in their faces. Though he was still weary from his ordeal at sea, he suspected that Athena had made him look tall and strong and given him an air of great dignity. As the feasting began, the blind singer sat down by a pillar and cradled his harp in his arms. Soon the spirit moved him, and he began singing about famous warriors who had died in battle. He sang about the heroes of the Trojan War, about brave Achilles and King Agamemnon. As the singer sang, Odysseus wept for his lost friends. He hid his face behind his robe, so no one could see his tears. He did not want them to guess who he really was. But later, after sports and games, Odysseus felt merry and confident. He called out to the singer, "Sing about the wooden horse that helped the Greeks win the war. If you tell the true story of the fall of Troy, I will praise your storytelling the whole world over." The singer began singing about a Greek named Odysseus. He sang about how Odysseus had ordered the making of a giant wooden horse and how he had hidden himself inside the horse with his finest warriors. He sang about how the Trojans had brought the horse inside the walls of Troy and how the Greeks, led by Odysseus, had crept out at nightfall and laid siege to the city and thus won the war. As the minstrel sang, Odysseus began to weep again. This time he could not hide his grief. He wept uncontrollably. King Aloysius ordered the singer to silence his harp. "Our guest has wept twice today when you sang about the Trojan War," he said. "I imagine your songs have stirred his memories." Then the king turned to Odysseus. "Sir, do not try to hide what you feel or who you are any longer," he said. "Tell us your name. Tell us about your travels and what you have seen. Did you see the fall of Troy? Did your friends perish in battle? I ask you to tell us your story." Chapter 5, Return to Ithaca. Odysseus stood and faced the crowd. "Where should I begin?" he said. "I have such a long, sad tale to tell. First, I will tell you my name. I am Odysseus. My home is Ithaca, a bright and beautiful island. The island is low, and the water around it can often be rough. But there is no sight more beautiful than one's own home. I have not seen my island or my family for 20 years, not since I sailed away to fight the Trojan War. Odysseus went on to tell how the Greeks had fought for 10 years in faraway Troy, and how their mighty fleet had set sail for home after winning the war. He told how a terrible storm had driven his 12 ships off course and sent them to the land of the Lotus Eaters, and then to the cave of the hideous Cyclops monster. Odysseus told about the horror of seeing the giant one-eyed monster eat his warriors alive, and how he had led his men in a daring escape by hiding in the fleece of the monster's rams. Odysseus told how the wind god had given him a bag of winds to help speed his ships home, and how when they were within sight of Ithaca, his men had disobeyed his orders and opened the bag while he was sleeping, releasing a terrible gale that swept their ships back across the sea, far away from home. Odysseus told how cannonball giants had murdered most of his men and sunk 11 of his 12 ships. He told how he and his crew had then sailed to the island of Circe, the enchantress, and how the beautiful witch had turned his men into pigs. He told about his journey to the mist-filled land of the dead, where he saw the ghosts of friends who had died, and the saddest sight of all, the ghost of his own mother. Odysseus told how his ship sailed past the sirens, the strange bird women who lured sailors to watery death with their beautiful singing. He told how his ship was forced to pass between two deadly creatures, the hideous six-eyed monster Scylla and the whirlpool monster Charybdis. Odysseus told how his men had disobeyed the gods and slain the cattle of the sun god, and how for this offense the gods had drowned the last of his men in a horrible storm at sea. Odysseus told how he had then sailed alone to the island of Calypso, and how the goddess had kept him prisoner for 7 long years. He told about leaving her island and clinging to a raft for 20 days and nights at sea, until he had finally crawled upon the very shores where Princess Nausicaa and her handmaidens had found him. At the end of his astonishing tale, Odysseus sighed with sorrow. "I want now only to return to my family," he said. "I want to go home." All who had listened to Odysseus' story were silent with awe. At long last the king spoke. "For many years this man has been far from his native land, and now he asks only that we help him return to his family. Tomorrow 52 of our finest sailors will prepare a ship, and at sunset we will send him on his way home." The next day, King Elatius' servants packed a great ship with fine clothes and gifts of gold. As the sun sank low in the sky, the king's men sacrificed an ox to Zeus, almighty ruler on Mount Olympus. "May the gods always bless your family for your great kindness and generosity," Odysseus said to the king. The ship's sailors then laid a blanket on the deck for Odysseus. They urged him to lie on the blanket and take his rest as they set sail. In silence, Odysseus lay down on the blanket and closed his eyes. The crew took their places. They raised their anchor and began to row. As the ship moved through the twilight, Odysseus fell asleep. After years of struggling against the ills of war, against storms and hideous monsters, he struggled no more. The king's ship sped like a team of galloping stallions over the sea. Even falcons could not keep up with her as she moved across the purple waves. In the long hour before dawn, the ship drew close to an island harbor. Bordered by steep slopes, the harbor was free of wild winds. Its waters were calm. The crew dropped anchor and leaped ashore. Odysseus did not stir from his slumber. The sailors wrapped the sleeping warrior in his blanket and gently carried him onto the sand. There they left him, sleeping peacefully in the shade of an olive tree. They placed his gifts near him on the sand, bronze cauldrons, golden plates, and richly woven garments. Then they returned to their ship and set sail. After 20 long years, Odysseus of Ithaca was finally home.